All right. Hi, everyone. We are live. My name is Katie Kuntz, and I'm a social news producer here at CNBC. Today, we're going to be talking all about the latest Bitcoin mining news with CNBC technology reporter MacKenzie Sigalos. Thanks for being with us, Mac.
Hey, really good to be here.
So let's jump right into it. Our first question is, how does the Bitcoin mining process work?
You know, it's such a good question because I feel like the term mining gets thrown around a lot. And while, people may get it conceptually at a high level, what it means in real terms, like what's actually happening, who's doing it, how are they doing it, it's definitely less intuitive. So, high level first, then maybe let's get into the weeds of it. So, mining for Bitcoin, it serves two purposes. One, it creates new coins, and then two, it's basically this digital accounting system for the entire network, meaning that these miners who are all over the planet are actually verifying and adding all exchanges of existing Bitcoin to a public ledger. And of course, this public ledger is known as the blockchain. This is what makes Bitcoin decentralized. There's no central authority clearing transactions or keeping the books. And in my opinion, this is one of the coolest things about the world's biggest cryptocurrency. Okay, now this is, I think, the harder part, the nitty gritty. Who are these miners? What are they actually doing? So, literally anyone on planet Earth can be a miner, but you do need specialized hardware to do it. And crucially, you need access to cheap electricity to make it worth it. So, these mining rigs are basically just high-powered computers that are racing to be the first to solve a complex math problem. And someone wins this race roughly once every 10 minutes. And whoever wins both unlocks new Bitcoin, which they get as a reward. That's the mining of new Bitcoin. And they also, at the same time, are verifying the latest block of transactions. Now, it's virtually impossible to win this race by yourself nowadays. So individual miners typically team up with others to pool their computational power together. So that means the reward not as big because you're sharing it, but your chances of winning are definitely much higher. That was a lot. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting. So the US is now the top destination for Bitcoin miners. What's attracting them to the US?
Well, for one, Beijing deciding to totally crack down on its crypto mining this spring, that was a black swan event for the Bitcoin mining industry because, for years, China dominated this business. We're talking roughly 75% of the world's Bitcoin miners were there in China. And then Beijing says a few months ago, nope, no more mining. So then suddenly we see half of the entire Bitcoin network go dark practically overnight. And then this mass migration of humans and physical hardware gets underway. And many of them have headed to the US. But, that's obviously not the only reason that people are coming here. The US has been quietly building up all of this physical infrastructure for hosting Bitcoin miners for years, like when it was super unpopular to be doing that. Because remember, starting in late 2017, we were in a multi-year crypto winter. So there wasn't much demand for these big Bitcoin mining farms, but you had these smart, prescient US mining operators who saw an opening. And they also saw all of this, cheap money that was available. And so they deployed it to build up the mining ecosystem in the States in the hopes that one day there would be demand. And I mean, look, here we are. There's definitely demand there. Another thing to mention about the US that's hugely important is the country is flush with sources of low-cost power, which more often than not tend to be renewable. And I really cannot stress enough how important this is because miners at scale, they're competing in a low-margin industry where their only variable cost typically is energy, which means that they're incentivized to migrate to the world's cheapest sources of power.
So going off of that, what states specifically are top destinations for Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, that's a question that a lot of people have. So we see that states like New York, Kentucky, Georgia, and especially Texas are very popular destinations for Bitcoin miners. Now, Each state has its own appeal, but generally we are talking about places which are epicenters of low cost, renewable energy, a fact which has already begun to recast the narrative among skeptics that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. But that's a whole other conversation, so maybe we come to that later. If you look specifically at what these states have to offer, let's start with Texas, which is truly a mining mecca in the US, but also for the world. You've got crypto friendly politicians, one, a deregulated power grid that lets customers choose between power providers and buy spot energy. And then, maybe most importantly, Texas often has some of the world's lowest energy prices. Plus, it's rapidly adding renewable power to its grid. You've also got miners who are, it's so cool. I was actually just in Texas, and so I was seeing some of this firsthand, but there's this whole other category of mining. It's niche and it's growing, but you've got miners who are literally driving out to oil fields with these trailers that are packed with rigs, with mining rigs, so they can use the energy from stranded natural gas that would otherwise just be flared or vented. So it's really remarkable what's happening on the ground in Texas. There's definitely more to say on this. Washington and New York, you're going to see hydro-powered mining farms. New York is also one of the states where Bitcoin miners are harnessing nuclear power. I've spent a lot of time talking to the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, and he has also popularized the idea of mining Bitcoin with nuclear power in Florida. And then there's Kentucky. It's got a new law just passed this year that actually grants certain tax exemptions to crypto mining operations. And even though you tend to think of coal, which is indeed a big player in Kentucky's energy mix, many of the mining operations there are gravitating to renewables. Kentucky is known for hydroelectric and wind power. It's also got these abandoned natural gas wells. So there's so much happening across the country. It's super interesting. And it's a business that's really only just getting started.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to watch where things go from here. So our next question is, who are the top players in the mining industry?
Well, there are definitely a lot. Three of the big names that come to mind: Core Scientific, Riot Blockchain, and Marathon Digital. These are, three major players in America's Bitcoin mining industry. Core has operations in North Dakota, North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky. It's expanding. Riot actually has a huge presence in Texas. It recently acquired Windstone, which many say is the biggest Bitcoin mine in America. And I actually just went there to Rockdale, Texas, not too long ago, and it blew me away. I don't know if you've ever been to one of these Bitcoin mining farms, but there's so much noise, there's so much heat, there's so much happening nonstop. And it was really, for me, the first time that I felt the physicality of Bitcoin. I was talking to Thomas Heller, who works with Compass Mining, and he actually had this great way of describing a similar experience. He said something like, you can really connect the intangible aspects of Bitcoin as a currency with the physical nature of these machines consuming power and doing these calculations. It is really something else. But I feel like I'm on a tangent. So back to your question. The field of Bitcoin miners is definitely growing in the US as more and more people jump into the mining business. And you've got Bitcoin that just broke through a new price level. And with the first ever Bitcoin linked ETF coming out this week, some analysts are saying this is just the beginning of Bitcoin's bull run. And of course, the higher the Bitcoin goes, the more lucrative it is to mine for it, right? So there's definitely an incentive to would-be miners.
So our next question is something that I found very interesting. Can you tell us more about El Salvador's volcano-powered Bitcoin mining?
Yes. I have to say, just in general, it's fascinating what's happening in El Salvador right now because the president, Nayib Bukele, has banked his political future on this nationwide Bitcoin experiment. The country adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. It rolled out its own crypto wallet to let citizens transact in Bitcoin. There's a fleet of Bitcoin ATMs across the country, and all businesses, from McDonald's to hair salons to coffee shops, are required by law to accept Bitcoin. And now, to your question, President Bukele is also getting into the mining business. So El Salvador is using power harnessed from a volcano to mine for Bitcoin. So we're, talking about geothermal energy here. Iceland, by the way, has been doing this. So there's definitely, a test case showing that this works and it's effective. When you think of geothermal energy, we're talking about something that's renewable, it's clean, and in some places in El Salvador, it might be making use of a previously untapped resource, which makes the case that Bitcoin can act as an accelerant to renewable energy development. And keep in mind, no shortage of supply here. The country is literally called the land of the volcanoes.
Yeah, I just find that very interesting. So thanks for telling us more.
Yeah.
We also got a lot of questions about individual Bitcoin mining. So how can individuals get involved in setting up a mining operation in their own home? And is Bitcoin mining profitable for individuals?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. You think back to the early days of Bitcoin, and people were able to mine it on their home PCs, and mine a lot of them doing it that way. But today, the mining industry is mostly dominated by your large scale players who can have enough money to afford to buy these tens of thousands of ASICs, which is sophisticated hardware that's been specifically designed to create new Bitcoin. Now, ASICs are expensive, and they tend to get more expensive the higher Bitcoin goes. Now, to your question, I have spoken to plenty of Bitcoin enthusiasts who dabble in mining for fun at the individual level. One person I interviewed lives in LA, and he jerry-rigged this $875 mini mining rig that plugs right into the USB port of his laptop. And this guy legit went into a Starbucks to use their free electricity to run his mini rig. So people, some of them were definitely getting creative. In terms of, if you want to take this more seriously, like really invest, become a Bitcoin miner yourself, but maybe you don't have the capacity at home to do it out of your garage, or you don't want to listen to the sound of these miners, and they are noisy. There's a company called Compass Mining, and what they do is they let customers buy mining machines from their website, and then Compass places that gear in partner data centers and takes care of all of the physical logistics. And I talked to one customer who told me that when China expelled all its miners, so remember when half the Bitcoin network went dark, it doubled the amount of money that his machines generated daily. We also know that Jack Dorsey, of course, Twitter and Square CEO, also is a customer of this company, Compass. And, Square is getting its skin in the Bitcoin mining game too. It appears that Jack Dorsey is a big believer in democratizing this process of Bitcoin mining. In a string of tweets a few days ago, he said that, mining for Bitcoin, it's not accessible to everyone right now, but it should be. So he said that Square is seriously considering building its own Bitcoin mining system based on custom silicone, so that generating new Bitcoin is as easy as literally just plugging into a power source. So they don't know for sure if they're going to do it, but like right now, it's something that they're looking into. So that'll be fascinating if they roll out a consumer grade product.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so our last question, we can't talk about Bitcoin mining without talking about the debate around Bitcoin's carbon footprint. What can you tell us about this?
I mean, where to start? That's such a huge topic, hugely relevant in this space. For the first time, the US is the #1 destination for Bitcoin miners, right? So 1/3 of the Bitcoin network is here. That percentage, by the way, very likely understated. In any case, it's growing swiftly. And I've spoken to many experts who say, most miners that are new to North America will be powered by renewables, or they'll be offset by renewable energy credits. And some of the existing mining operations that we've already talked about today, they're powered currently today by zero emission clean energy sources. Members of the Bitcoin Mining Council, which is primarily comprised of US based miners, they say they're around 66% sustainable. So that's huge. Another key part of this debate that you really need to keep in mind when you think about it is that a lot of wind and solar and hydropower is not consumed by the grid. It's wasted. So what these miners are doing is they're monetizing that excess, right? And they're improving the core economics of renewable energy production. So Bitcoin mining actually incentivizes the rollout of more renewable energy. And this is a point that Jack Dorsey has made, saying that, ultimately miners have to make a profit, and getting cheap renewable energy maximizes that potential for profit. So we're already seeing this play out in places where Bitcoin mining is helping to catalyze a greener electricity grid. We talked about this earlier, but I really feel like it bears repeating now because it's so important to this debate. There are those miners in Texas and in elsewhere who are connecting their rigs to natural gas that's going to waste on oil fields. Now, if they weren't doing this, that natural gas deposits, they would either be vented, which just releases methane directly into the air, a very poor choice for the environment since it's the greenhouse effects are shown to be much stronger than carbon dioxide, or they'd be flared, right, which is more environmentally friendly but not 100% effective. I mean, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. But I will say one last point because it is so important, and I feel like we need to hit it before we go. What is fundamentally misunderstood time and again is that energy consumption is not equivalent to carbon emissions. 1 unit of hydropower does not have the same environmental impact as the equivalent amount of power sourced from coal. And those two things are often conflated, and it confuses the larger point. Okay, I think I will leave it there.
Sounds great. Well, yeah, this is definitely an important conversation to be having, and definitely a space that we'll be watching closely. So thank you so much for answering all of our questions today. I hope you'll come back and join us again. I'm sure there's a lot more that's going to be unfolding here. So yeah, thank you, Mac. And thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.